It was just after midnight on May 14, 2008, when 19-year-old Brandon Swanson called his parents. His voice was steady, maybe a little urgent. He told them he'd accidentally driven his car into a ditch and needed help. He wasn't hurt or panicked, just stranded and looking for a ride. He thought he was somewhere near the town of Lind, Minnesota. So his parents jumped in their car and headed out to get him, but nothing looked like what Brandon had described: no blinking hazards, no car on the side of the road, just empty gravel roads and confusion. Then came a moment that would haunt them forever. Brandon said quietly, "Oh my God." The line went dead. And just like that, he was gone. Brandon had spent the evening celebrating the end of spring semester. He was a first-year student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College and had joined a few friends at a low-key get-together in Canby. It wasn't anything wild. Friends later said he hadn't been drinking heavily and didn't seem upset or reckless when he left. His drive should have been simple, a straight shot home. But somewhere along that stretch of dark Minnesota backroads, something went wrong. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called home. He told his parents he'd veered off the road and landed in a ditch. He believed he was near Lind, a town only a few miles away. His dad offered to pick him up, and Brandon agreed to wait with his hazard lights on. They drove out immediately. But when they arrived at the area he described, they couldn't find him: no car, no flashing lights, nothing at all. They called him back and he answered. For nearly 50 minutes, Brandon stayed on the line while they tried to locate each other. He talked them through where he thought he was, describing street signs, gravel roads, and lights he believed were coming from Lind. He told them he was walking toward what he thought was the town, staying along the edge of the road. They honked their horn and flashed their lights. He couldn't see or hear any of it. At one point, he said he was going to take a shortcut across a field. He thought it would help him reach the road faster. He mentioned hearing water nearby, maybe a river or creek. Still, he sounded calm. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Oh my God." The call cut out. His parents tried calling back, again and again. For a while, the phone kept ringing. Then, just after dawn, it started going straight to voicemail. They reported Brandon missing that morning. But at first, authorities didn't take it seriously. They figured he had gotten drunk and wandered off, or maybe just needed to sleep it off somewhere. But Brandon's parents knew better. He was responsible and wouldn't just disappear. Later that day, they found his car, not near Lind, but over 20 miles away near the town of Taunton. That discovery changed everything. The car was off a gravel road in a remote area. It wasn't damaged or stuck. It hadn't crashed. The doors were locked and the keys were gone. Suddenly, it became clear that Brandon had been completely disoriented. Everything he described on the phone, the roads, the lights, the landmarks, none of it was where he thought it was. In that pitch-black night, he had gotten everything wrong. Searchers brought in tracking dogs. They picked up Brandon's scent leading away from the car, following a gravel road, then cutting across 2 fields toward the Yellow Medicine River. His trail led right up to the water's edge, and then vanished. Authorities searched the area over and over. They brought in helicopters, ATVs, and hundreds of volunteers. Divers searched the river, thinking he may have fallen in. But no body was ever found. No clothing. No phone. Not even a shoe. It was as if he had vanished into the air. There were no signs of a struggle. No evidence of foul play. Just an open road, an abandoned car, and a trail that stopped cold. So what made Brandon say those last words? Was he startled by something? Did he fall into something? Did someone else appear out of nowhere? There was no sound on the line, no scream, no crash, just silence. Yet for hours after the call ended, his phone continued to ring. It wasn't until sunrise that it finally went to voicemail. The mystery deepened as more details came to light. Brandon hadn't just misunderstood his location, he was miles away from where he claimed to be. His sense of direction was entirely off. But why? Was he trying to mislead his parents? Was he under the influence? Or was it simply the disorientation of darkness and rural roads? Brandon was clear-headed during the call. He didn't slur his words or sound afraid. He seemed confused at times, maybe a little frustrated, but he was still in control of the conversation. But then came that moment. Oh my God. And then, silence. That was the last anyone ever heard from him. In the next episode, we'll look at the trail he left behind, the cell phone pings that made no sense, the timelines that never lined up, and why some investigators believe he didn't vanish where everyone was looking. Because maybe Brandon Swanson wasn't just lost. Maybe he was taken. Brandon Swanson vanished into darkness on the night of May 14, 2008. But the real mystery didn't begin with his disappearance, it began with the search. From the moment his car was found nowhere near where he claimed to be, investigators were thrown into a maze of questions. Brandon believed he was near Lind, Minnesota. But his abandoned Chevy Lumina sat silently on the side of a gravel road near Taunton, 25 miles away. If he had made a mistake, how had he been so wrong? If he hadn't, what had happened in between? The scent trail picked up by search dogs gave hope in the early days. It led away from Brandon's car, down a gravel road, and across 2 fields toward the Yellow Medicine River. It stopped abruptly at the water's edge, as if Brandon had simply stepped into the current and disappeared. Divers were called in. Day after day, they dragged the river, but there was no sign of him. No clothing. No phone. Not even a backpack or shoe. And this was spring in Minnesota. The water was shallow in places. If he'd drowned, his body should have surfaced. But it didn't. And that's when the river theory started to unravel. The call Brandon made to his parents lasted for nearly 50 minutes. During that time, he walked and talked. He described roads, trees, faint lights he thought were coming from Lind. But when investigators checked phone tower records, things got strange. His phone had pinged off a tower near Minnesota, not Lind. This meant he had likely been walking in a completely different direction than he believed. And it wasn't just a one-time misjudgment. The towers showed that Brandon had been moving while on the call, and the movement didn't match where his parents were searching at all. He was walking, and walking, but in the wrong direction. That fact alone wasn't necessarily disturbing. People get disoriented in the dark all the time. What was disturbing was what came next. After the call ended with his final words, "Oh my God," his phone kept ringing for nearly 6 hours. And those rings connected. His phone was still on, still nearby, and still active. Yet no one could find it. Where was he really going? The geography of the area is rural and confusing. Gravel roads twist between crop fields and marshes. Without light, it would be easy to misjudge your surroundings. But Brandon wasn't just confused. He was confidently wrong. He gave directions. He gave visual markers. He gave consistent, steady responses during the call. He didn't sound panicked. He believed what he was seeing was real. That made his disappearance even harder to explain. If he was so sure of where he was, how had he been so far off? Some believe Brandon may have experienced geographic disorientation, a state that can occur when someone becomes so focused on a belief that they begin to build mental landmarks that aren't actually there. Combine that with rural darkness, minimal moonlight, and lack of familiar surroundings, and it's possible he was creating a map in his mind that never matched the real world. But others argue that his thinking was far too clear for that. He stayed on the phone for nearly an hour. He made coherent observations. He kept walking in one direction. And that brings up a theory that still haunts the case: what if Brandon wasn't alone? When Brandon said "oh my God," his parents were still on the line. They heard it clearly. But there was no sound afterward. No rustling. No cry for help. No impact or struggle. If he had fallen into the river, there should have been noise. If he had been attacked, there should have been a scuffle. But there was nothing. Just silence. That silence has led to speculation. What if he saw something? Or someone? What if he was being followed? His phone didn't shut off. It stayed on for hours after that moment. Some believe he may have thrown it. Others suggest it was taken from him. If so, by who? And why leave the car untouched? Why leave no trace? Theories that don't add up. There are several possibilities that have been explored over the years. Foul play: could Brandon have stumbled across something he wasn't meant to see? An illegal operation? Someone hiding in the darkness? Animal attack: while wolves and cougars exist in parts of Minnesota, attacks on humans are incredibly rare. And again, there would have been noise. Accidental drowning, the most commonly accepted theory. But the lack of any remains after extensive search efforts makes this hard to believe. Voluntary disappearance: almost no one close to Brandon supports this idea. He had no reason to run. No history of mental illness. And he called his parents for help, twice. Each theory presents its own dead ends. Each one leaves behind just enough room for doubt. One of the eeriest details about this case comes from Brandon's habit of driving to clear his head. He often took rural backroads, even when there were faster ways to get home. Some believe he wasn't just lost, he may have intentionally taken a detour that night. But if he had done it before, he likely knew the area. So again, why was he so disoriented? Others have pointed to a patch of land near where the dogs lost the scent. A piece of private property that was never thoroughly searched. The landowner refused to allow cadaver dogs at the time, and by the time permission was granted, weeks had passed. Some wonder if that's where the trail truly ended. In the years since Brandon disappeared, his case has remained cold. His parents have never stopped searching. They helped pass Brandon's law, which changed how law enforcement handles missing adult cases in Minnesota. Today, adults reported missing must be immediately investigated, regardless of age or perceived risk. But the search for Brandon himself has yielded nothing. No closure. No body. No clear theory. Just a long, empty road. A phone that rang through the night. And the final words that still echo. In the next episode, we explore the only possible conclusion left, that Brandon may have still been moving long after the search ended. We'll follow the few clues that remain and dive into the chilling possibility that he didn't die that night. At least, not right away. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what happens in the dark. It's what waits at the edge of it. By the time the sun rose on May 14, 2008, Brandon Swanson had been missing for nearly 6 hours. His phone had stopped ringing, his voice had gone silent, and his trail had ended at the edge of the Yellow Medicine River. But there was something no one expected. Even after all this time, even after the exhaustive searches, people close to the case keep coming back to one detail: a faint sound that wasn't supposed to be there. Something that, to this day, no one has been able to fully explain. When Brandon's final words echoed across the phone, "Oh my God," his parents froze. There had been no warning, no sudden noise. Just that brief moment of fear, and then nothing. But when audio specialists reviewed the call, they noticed something strange, background interference that didn't belong. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a recognizable sound. More like a distortion that pulsed right before the call cut out. Some described it as a hum. Others said it resembled a mechanical buzz or static pulse. It was faint, almost imperceptible. But it wasn't random. This opened a new theory. Could Brandon have wandered close to something emitting a signal, a power station, a remote relay, maybe even equipment not meant to be there? Could he have stumbled onto private land with surveillance or tech installations? None of that could be proven. But it raised a new idea. Maybe the final moment wasn't just a fall or a misstep. Maybe it was an encounter. Brandon's phone remained active for hours after the call dropped. Investigators tracked it using tower pings, but something didn't add up. The pings continued in a pattern that suggested movement, very subtle, but inconsistent with a stationary phone. At first, searchers thought this could be explained by shifting signals between towers. But some experts believed otherwise. The theory? Brandon was still alive for some time after that call ended. If true, it meant his final words didn't mark the moment of death. It meant he may have continued walking, maybe even hiding. It opened up the possibility that he was disoriented, scared, or being pursued. Brandon's case has become a fixture in online forums and investigative communities. One term keeps coming up, the echo room. It's not a literal place. It's an idea, that some people, when they go missing, seem to vanish into a kind of psychological echo. The logic behind it says that once a person becomes too disconnected from what they know, they begin creating meaning where there is none. They respond to their own confusion by doubling down on the wrong choices. And eventually, they become impossible to find. Some think Brandon may have entered this state. That he truly believed he was walking towards safety, when in reality, every step took him further into isolation. If that's true, the moment he said "oh my God" might have been the moment he realized it. In the weeks that followed Brandon's disappearance, there were whispers of unusual reports from residents near the area. People claimed they heard voices calling for help in the middle of the night. Some said they saw flashlights moving through fields at strange hours, long before official search parties were out. None of this could be confirmed. Some of it was likely imagination. But not all of it. In one instance, a man reported hearing someone knocking on his back door after midnight. He lived only a few miles from where Brandon's phone last pinged. By the time he got up and checked, there was no one there. But muddy footprints led from his porch back into the woods. Police investigated. The prints had no match. No one came forward. And it was never officially linked to the case. Still, it added to the unease that surrounded the search. Brandon wasn't just missing, he had vanished in a way that didn't make sense. Now, more than 15 years later, every explanation still carries doubt. Foul play is possible, but unlikely without evidence. There was no sign of a struggle. No signs of anyone else at the scene. Drowning remains the official theory. But the exhaustive river search, combined with the lack of any remains, has made it harder to accept. Animal attack is considered a stretch. There would have been sounds, tracks, or something left behind. Accidental misadventure, getting lost, falling, succumbing to exposure, still seems like the most plausible answer. But it doesn't explain the unnatural silence, the cell phone data, or the missing personal items. Even the voluntary disappearance theory feels hollow. Brandon had no reason to run. He made plans. He called for help. He never hinted at anything being wrong. No body, no closure. That's what makes this case so uniquely painful. There's nothing to hold onto. No object, no evidence, not even a piece of clothing. Just a car on a quiet road, a voice in the dark, and a family that never stopped searching. His parents still leave the porch light on for him. Every year, they host a vigil. Every year, they share the same message: Brandon, we're still here. We haven't stopped. The case has become more than just a missing person file. It's a reminder that some questions don't fade with time. They deepen. They tighten. They haunt. And every time someone listens to that call, to the calm, clear voice of a boy asking for help, they hear it. That final, chilling phrase. The moment that changed everything. Oh my God. We may never know what Brandon saw. Whether it was something in the trees, something just out of reach, or something only he could feel. We may never know what made him stop speaking, or why his phone kept ringing through the dawn. But this much is certain. The ditch didn't just swallow a car. It swallowed a son, a voice, and a truth that refuses to come to the surface. And until it does, Brandon Swanson's case will remain one of the most haunting unsolved disappearances in America.